All right, good evening, everybody. Jim Day had a conflict, so I am subbing for him today, but we're still going to have a great meeting because we've got Rick Nevins who's going to talk about his trip that he had earlier the year. But I do have a few things I wanted to kind of cover with the group and just make you aware of a few upcoming events and activities. And then I'm going to turn it over to Rick to actually cover business around voting, officer voting, and the slate that he's going to present before we actually get into his presentation. So a couple of things here. The holiday parade, the Williamsburg Holiday Parade, at least at this point, is on. It's scheduled for Sunday, December 5th at 4 p.m. Linda Coppinger is has agreed to help facilitate from the group standpoint to organize, and Nancy Carter has willing to have folks come over and give some hospitality and also provide, or at least have some parking spots, since apparently the parade's going to be kicking off near her place. So just keep that marked on your calendar, and if you can participate, great. If you're going to watch on the sidelines and wave to those participating, all is welcome. We are going to have, at least at this point, going to have a holiday party, but different than what we were even scheduling, talking about a couple months ago. So we're not going, or at least we're going to have a party. We're going to do it at Paul's Deli in Newtown. We haven't firmed up all the specific dates and the activities, so we're not doing a potluck dinner this year. It'll be a little more informal. That way we can still respect and manage to have the appropriate COVID-19 conditions that give us at least for those that are comfortable in doing that kind of setup in a formal setting. Hopefully the weather will cooperate as well, given December. So that is still set for December 8th. Like I said, we'll work out a little more specific timings given the setup, and then we'll communicate through our normal communication means more detail. So the one thing that it's not going to be, it won't be a potluck for this year, but hopefully an opportunity, at least as a club and members, to get together face to face in the evening and at least get together in that way. The other thing is there's the Bike the Bridge is coming up, and that is the first Saturday in November 6th. At least earlier in the week, there was still three positions that we're looking for volunteers on. If you can volunteer, great. Go to the website. Rick has set up a link to be able to volunteer for that. For those that have volunteered, thanks in advance for doing that. John Hinton, as a volunteer coordinator here, has been helping to set that in place. But that's just around the corner. So from a coordination standpoint, if you're able to volunteer, please go ahead and get yourself known and select one of those three remaining spots. Let me turn it over to Rick to kind of introduce or talk through the slate of candidates and officers for the 2022 year. Rick?
All right, thank you. I'm going to share a page here, a PDF. Do you see that? Okay. So as past president, I've chaired the nominating committee for the 2022 slate of officers, which so you see on the list here, we have 8, president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, and then 4 directors. And the process is, according to our bylaws or policy, we present the initial slate at the October general membership meeting, and then we have actual vote at the November meeting. But we also open up the floor to any candidates, nominees from the floor at this meeting. So as of a week ago, I guess, we've got the slate filled from a nominating committee standpoint. We did have an opening in the president slot, but Jim decided to stay for another year. So really, everybody is planning to run again for 2022, with the exception of Fran. And, Fran has been like a volunteer extraordinaire for the last several years and has a well-earned break, I think. She's got other plans for next year. So she's stepping back. She's still going to lead rides when she can, but she's stepping back from the director position as well. She's currently advertising chair and route book coordinator. So she's stepping back from that as well. Mark Holt has agreed to come back on the board as a director. So he would be nominated to replace Fran. And then the other kind of open slot we have, Andy Valentine is, as you all know, has gotten very involved with the bicycle. What do they call that? I think of it as recycle bicycle, but the program to bring bicycles to the underprivileged or people that can't otherwise afford bikes in the Williamsburg area. So he's gotten really involved in that program and is kind of stepping away from some of the involvement in WAB. So he had been chairing the publicity committee and the new member ambassador. So those two slots we'll be looking to fill as well. The 4 slots that I have listed at the bottom of this page are not voted upon. They're actually appointed by the board. So just making everybody aware that those are areas that we're looking for help in. So if any of you would like to get involved or find out more about what's involved in these positions, feel free to let me know, or Jim Day or Dave Hand or any of us, and we'll be happy to explain what's involved. Or obviously Fran Wenbert and Andy Ballantyne would be probably the ones that are, most knowledgeable what exactly goes on with those positions. So feel free to reach out to any of us or them if you'd like to learn more. And say that'll be a task of the board to fill these positions in the future. Any questions, or well, I guess I should ask, any nominations from the floor for any of the officer positions?
And if anybody, I've had to mute a number of people here, so if you do want to speak up, you'll have to unmute yourself or go ahead and use the chat. If you don't want to speak up verbally, go ahead and use the chat section and type in as well. Either way works.
Okay, I think that covers that topic, so I can stop sharing that and share my presentation, which is in Keynote. Here it is. All right. Okay, y'all see that?
Yep, it's coming through.
All right, cool. Let me just I need to minimize this other screen here. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about a trip that 6 of us took this summer. 4 of us are on the call. I saw Homer Ho, Rich Slack, Ken McFarland have all joined the call. They were on it, on the trip, as was Paul Bennett and Randy Smith. Smith, is that right? Yeah, I think it is. So this trip we did back in June, and just to give you a little perspective on where the C&O Canal Trail is, it goes from Cumberland, Maryland to Washington, D.C. It follows along what was the C&O Canal and is now owned or operated by the National Park Service. It's 184.5 miles long, a mixed surface, and you'll see got some video, you'll see what the surface looks like. I would say the majority of it is crushed stone. The first about 30, 40 miles or more dirt, packed dirt, and some cases mud, sort of between Cumberland and Hancock. But then from Hancock on, the trail gets much nicer, more just crushed stone. At Cumberland, it actually connects to another trail called the Great Allegheny Passage, which is a rail trail, and that goes the whole way to Pittsburgh. So some of us did that, and I'm sure many of you on this call have done that as well. But a few of us did that back, I think in 2017, I think it was. And so now this year we kind of did the other half from Cumberland on to DC. A little bit of history on the C&O Canal. Was chartered, began construction in 1825. The original vision was to connect from DC to Western Pennsylvania. They reached Cumberland, Maryland in 1850, but they were sort of doomed, I think, from the beginning because, the railroad was also building through that sort of same corridor. And the railroad just proved to be more efficient. And I think there was, as I recall, there was a flood or some kind of problem that damaged part of the canal in 1924. I think at that time it was still sort of in limited operation, but the decision was made it wasn't worth the investment to fix the canal back up again. And so they officially ceased operations in 1924. And then in 1938, the US government purchased that right away, and it was designated part of the national park as a historical national park in 1971. So this was our group, as I said, myself, Paul Bennett, Randy Smith, Homer Ho, Ken McFarland, Rich Richlack. This picture was actually taken at the mile marker 0, which was at the very end of our trip. It's mile marker 0's in Washington, D.C. I thought you might be interested to see what kind of bikes we had. I think 2 of us had touring bikes, myself and Homer. 2 gravel bikes. So Randy and Paul had gravel bikes. And then Ken had a hybrid and Rich had a cyclocross. So we had kind of 4 different kinds of bikes, but say the one thing in common, they were all capable of at least 32 millimeter tires, which I would say definitely, especially for that first part from Cumberland to Hancock, you need the bigger tires. And also capable of being able to attach, panniers or bags, so that you can, in our case, we stayed in hotels, so we didn't take our camping gear, but you at least needed to be able to take our overnight toiletries and change of clothes and so forth, as we ended up staying 3 nights in hotels on our trip. So the itinerary, we debated sort of what's the best way to get ourselves and our bikes to Cumberland, and then get from Cumberland to DC, and then how do we get back home? We considered all going up and taking the train, but at least the train, I think it varies by train, but the particular train that you have to take to go from DC to Cumberland could only handle 2 bikes per train. So that really wasn't an option for us. And Randy actually lives in the DC area. And so he was able to take the train or take his bike on the train. but the rest of us loaded our bikes into a U-Haul. So we got a 15-foot U-Haul truck, one-way rental, which Ken and I drove from Williamsburg to Cumberland. And then we dropped it off in Cumberland and just walked to the hotel. It was pretty convenient. It was maybe a mile walk. That was $245. And then Homer, Paul, and Rich drove 2 vehicles, parked at the long-term parking at Reagan National, and took the train then to Cumberland. I think that was $22 each. I don't recall what the uplift was for Randy to take his bike, but he met them up there then and took the same train. Then we all met then at Cumberland. Ken and I got there first, so we found the only restaurant in town that was open. It's like everywhere else these days, a lot of restaurants aren't open on Mondays. And that was a Monday that we arrived there. So, but fortunately, we did find a place that we could eat, the Baltimore Street Grill in Cumberland, which was pretty good. And then stayed overnight at the Fairfield Inn and Suites. A little bit pricey, but it's very convenient. It's right within a stone's throw practically of the visitor center and the train station right there in downtown Cumberland, where the trail begins. So a couple pictures of the Cumberland bound getting to Cumberland. This is the train station in DC. Randy and Paul in the train, and Rich and Homer. So then Tuesday, we got up, had breakfast at the hotel, and we pedaled the 60 miles to Hancock. We really couldn't find any place for lunch, so we just, we had all packed extra snacks and so forth. But we just skipped lunch on Tuesday. Had dinner at a place called Buddy Lou's in Hancock, which was very nice. Had an outdoor deck that we sat on and had a good dinner. And stayed overnight in Hancock at a Super 8. So $60 a room per night, and you get what you pay for. But it was fine. So here's some pictures I'll go through that first day. This is downtown Cumberland. So this is right where, this is the train station and the visitor center, and where the Gap and the C&O Trail really meet. This is all 6 of us getting ready to start. This gives you an idea what the trail conditions were like. Like I said, by far the worst conditions were that first 30 miles or so from Cumberland heading towards Hancock. I think there were 2 cases where we had to dismount and get around trees, but lots of mud puddles and slippery areas that were a little bit dicey. I wanted to explain one of the things that we were worried about was were we going to be able to get through the Paw Paw Tunnel? And the reason why we're worried about it, as you can see in this picture, you see where it's the indicator of the bypass trail. If you go on the official, National Park Service website and you read about the Paw Paw Tunnel, it'll tell you it's closed, that you're not allowed to go through it, or it's actually closed at the sort of eastern end, right on this map where you see the 155 marker. That is kind of where you exit if you're going from Cumberland towards DC. That's where you exit out of the tunnel. And right there's a steep embankment and some loose shale, and some engineers decided that it was hazardous and could be a landslide there or whatever. And so they say it's officially closed. However, they don't enforce it, is what we found. And if they did enforce it, we would have had to take that bypass trail, which would have added, I think the tunnel itself is less than a mile long, but the bypass trail is a couple miles, and it's like 200 or 300 feet of climb, and it's like a billy goat trail. And we would have had to walk our bikes, and I can't imagine, that would have been very challenging, pushing a 50-pound bike, 50 pounds till you get it loaded with all the gear and everything, up over 200 feet on a billy goat trail. We were glad that we were able to get through it. I'll put it that way. But what we found was it was passable. So this is the entrance to the Pawpaw Tunnel. Before we went through it, somebody that was also on the trail there snapped a picture for us. There's a picture inside the tunnel. And here you can read, it says effective November 25th, 2020, that it's a concern for instability and it's closed. This is on as you're kind of approaching the tunnel from the DC side. There was no such sign that we saw approaching it from the Cumberland side. But I think what we kind of decided was that the attorneys, deemed that they ought to officially close it, but they don't actually enforce it. But again, I would say it would be subject to change. So I wouldn't want to count on it being open. We lucked out, it was open, but I wouldn't want to guarantee it. This is again as we exited the tunnel, there's you can climb up, and got a picture over the top of the tunnel. And that's a picture looking down from where that previous picture was just showing. So you can see on the right-hand side, that's what they're concerned about, that shale and rock is kind of loose and could come crashing down on that kind of boardwalk area along there. So it was very muddy. We were glad that the hotel, that Super 8 that we stayed at, had like a hose outdoors that we could wash our bikes down, because they really needed it. This is Buddy Lou's, the deck. Again, I'd recommend it. Very convenient and good food, good service. And so we did have a little bit of a couple incidents. Actually, both of them, I guess, were with Homer. Sorry, Homer. But Homer slipped. On one thing we learned on these mud puddles, if you really want to probably plow straight through them, because the sides of them can get very slippery. And Homer caught one of those mud puddles the wrong way and kind of laid his bike down on its side, caused him to have a bent front fork, which, believe it or not, he was able to soldier through and ride the whole rest of the way with kind of a bent front fork. So he was constantly kind of pushing, counter steering the bike to try to keep it straight. Well, then when we stopped to take a little break at one point, I remember Homer and I were just talking, we heard this boing, and one of the spokes on his rear wheel popped. And so not only did he have a bent front fork, he had a wobbly rear wheel. Now that, I think, was, I don't know, maybe 10 miles to go to Hanover. And fortunately, right at Hanover, as you enter Hanover, there's a bike shop there, and they were able to fix his spoke. Anyway, that was Homer for a lot of the way till we got to Hanover. So the next day, Wednesday, we biked from Hancock to Harper's Ferry. The Super 8 didn't have breakfast, but there was a Sheetz nearby. And we all decided they had pretty good breakfast. 76 miles to Harper's Ferry. We had lunch from a place called Downsville General Store. I'm not sure I'd recommend it. It was, we found it on an app that we were using. It was probably 4 miles off the trail, but it was like a pretty good climb to get up there. And but again, there's not a lot of choices for lunch along the way. So it was either go there or just eat, granola bars or whatever. So we decided to do that. We had dinner at a place called the Rabbit Hole in downtown Harper's Ferry, which was excellent. And then after dinner drinks at a place called the Barn, which is, we got pictures of it here, I'll show you. Kind of an eclectic drinking spot there in Harper's Ferry. And then we stayed overnight at the Quality Inn, which I thought was pretty nice. There is a little climb to get to it, but I think in Harper's Ferry, you almost have, once you get over the bridge, and you'll see a picture from the trail into Harper's Ferry, you've got to kind of climb to go anywhere within the town of Harper's Ferry. So here's some pictures of the second day. This one from Hancock heading towards DC for about 13 miles. There's actually a paved trail called the Western Maryland Rail Trail that goes from Hancock to Fort Frederick. And that parallels more or less the C&O Canal Trail. So we decided to jump on that and get some, nice smooth surface for a change. And so that's what that first picture is. You can see the paved Western Maryland Rail Trail. That's Fort Frederick. Another picture of the inside of Fort Frederick. There wasn't anybody, there was no active tour guides or anything. It was open, but it was just, we were like the only people there. Just kind of walk around and look. This is just a scene along the Potomac. This is Dam 5, which is, I guess they built these dams in a few places along the Potomac so they would be able to have the supply of water in order to feed the canals. So that's what this dam was built for. And that's on the opposite side, that's a hydroelectric plant, which I believe is still operating. That's a typical lock house. You'll see a lot of these. So every lock, and I think there's, I forget how many, 70 some locks along the C&O. And every one had to have operators that when the canal boat came along, the lock operator had to come out and, open the gates and flood the lock and raise the water and so forth so that the canal boat could proceed. And that, a lot of times these were families. So, the lock master and his wife and children, whatever, would live in these little houses. So they're still, a lot of them are still there. That's the Downsville General Store that we had lunch at, Paul getting some water. And we had these unbelievably huge subs that we ended up, as we were riding up to the Downsville General Store, Ken had a blown tire. So not the inner tube, but the actual tire itself kind of failed. The side of it bulged out. And I think we decided, he didn't really hit a obstacle or a nail or anything. It's just the tire failed. So fortunately, we were able to locate a bike shop in, I think it was in Shepherdstown, yeah. And they drove over in a truck, a pickup truck drove over and with a tire. And so we all kind of hung out near that dam actually, and ate our subs while we waited for the mobile bike repair to come and fix Ken's tire for him. The other thing to mention about the Harper's Ferry is you do have to climb some steps to get over there. This is on the Harper's Ferry side of the river. So the C&O Trail is on the opposite side of this river. And to get to Harper's Ferry, you got to walk up, I'm going to say maybe 20 steps, something like that, to get up onto there's a pedestrian lane that kind of goes along this railroad trestle or bridge. And you walk your bike across and then walk back down the steps on the other side. And so that was a little bit of a challenge, again, with 50-pound bike, with your panniers and everything, to take it up 20 steps. And this is dinner at the Rabbit Hole. So again, this was probably the best dinner we had, I think, of the trip. Really scenic on the deck, overlooking, the river and the kind of mountain behind the river there. And this was the barn. Again, this was just something we found online, and it was kind of on the way back to the hotel. We walked from the Rabbit Hole back to the hotel. So we stopped in and had a beer there. So then the third day was Harper's Ferry to DC, breakfast at the hotel, 68 miles to Reagan National. I think the actual C&O part of that was maybe 60. And then there was another 6 or 8 miles on the Mount Vernon Trail to get from mile marker 0 of the C&O to the parking lot at Reagan National. And so the cars were there waiting for us. We loaded our bikes in the cars and headed home. So I have a caption here, note the great trail conditions. Really, I would say the last day especially, the trails were in awesome shape. It was very fine crushed gravel like this. I would say most, if not all, the third day, and even a lot of the second day. So overall, only I think the first day and the first probably 2/3 of the first day, would I say the trail was not very nice. In terms of the trail conditions, but here's a stop along the way at White's Ferry, which is a ferry that operates there across the Potomac. We got a picture of that one. Of course, cicadas in abundance. If you all recall, that was back in June was when cicadas were swarming. This is one of the few, most of the locks don't operate anymore, and a lot of the canal is just dry now. It's not, you can see where the canal used to be, where it's dug out, but a lot of it doesn't have water in it. But this is an example of a lock that's seemed to be more or less it's still in operation. Another one of those lock houses. Note the sign there, it says sleep here. So at least some of them you can rent and stay overnight at the lock house. So now we're getting closer to DC. This is Great Falls, which probably from just the scenery standpoint, this was the most scenic for me, at least, of the whole trip, was the Great Falls area. And now we're at mile marker 0, so we made it. And then going across the Mount Vernon Trail, it's just a shot across the Potomac at the Lincoln Memorial. So Paul had a video camera with him, and he put together a little video that I thought I'd share with you. This give you a little better feel maybe for some of the trail conditions, the experience we had.
Hello, everybody. The trailhead here. Just the side. Yeah. Go.
Okay, so I've got two quick slides here on I titled suggestions and lessons learned. And then we can open up for any questions you might have. And Homer, Rich, and Ken chime in anytime you like. Actually, Rich found this iPhone app called the C&O Companion, which I don't remember. It might have been $2 or $3, but you can get it on for your iPhone. That it's got a lot of information about the C&O, bike shops, points of interest, restaurants, kind of a mile by mile, description of everything along the way, where you can find water or whatever. So that came in handy. I think that's how we found the bike shop that Ken used. And I think that's how we found that questionable food lunch stop we had. I would suggest, especially if you're going to have a group, you might want to bring one spare tire for the group. Say something that could fit on everybody's bike, like a 32 millimeter. That would have come in handy. Bike considerations, I would say definitely 32 millimeter, preferably not a smooth 32, but with some tread. Again, especially for that first leg. Beyond that, you may get away with 28s, but 32s definitely would be a better bet. You got to be able to, your bike's got to be able to accommodate bags, either panniers, frame bag, bike rack bag, whatever. And fenders would be good. Paul actually was the only one of us that was smart enough to get fenders for his bike, but that I think really made a difference for him that first day. And restaurants were short-staffed, closed on Mondays. That's not too much different than what we have around here, I guess. The C&O is flat, but you will find hills if you go on side trips. So I think twice we discovered that. The first time was, I think, Paul and I decided to take a little different way to get to Fort Frederick. And we jumped off the trail at one point and said, well, why don't we just go up this road? Well, there was like a 100-foot or 200-foot climb getting up away from the river. So I think pretty much anywhere along there, once you get away from the river, you're going to be going uphill. We actually planned ahead and kind of said, well, everybody doesn't need to bring a hand pump. Everybody doesn't need to bring a toolkit. So just to lighten the load, we kind of shared, who would bring what. So definitely make sure your bike's ready for the trip. A good idea to go on some long gravel rides ahead of time. Make sure that you shake it out, especially if it's a bike you haven't ridden for a while. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but something I learned personally was you're much better off just kind of plowing straight through the puddles. Even though you're going to probably splash more water up, the sides of those puddles, if you get on the kind of, you get on the slope of the side of the the puddle, your bike can just slide out from under you pretty easily. So you're better off just kind of plowing straight through them. And think about lunch, because you're not going to be able to find many places to get lunch along the C&O. So you want to make sure you bring plenty of food. And the last thing I suggest is remember that 75 miles on gravel is like 100 on pavement. So make sure if you're going to do this in 3 days like we did, that you've got a lot of miles under your belt and you're prepared for it. And with that, that concludes the actual formal presentation. So open it up for any questions, or I'm going to stop sharing this. Comments, questions? Ken, Rich, Homer, anything to add I missed?
Hey, Rick, this is Diane Cheek. I know I don't get to join the group a whole lot, but I'm trying to get back in the swing of things. And so I appreciate, we did a little, just a small part of the C&O north of Shepherdstown down to Harper's Ferry and spent the night. But I will mention that stairwell, if I remember correctly, is a circular stairwell. Do you remember it being that?
As I recall, there was like, you go up some steps and there's like a landing and you make another turn, and yeah, it's a little bit circular.
Yeah. So it was a big surprise for me. Luckily, I had friends that took us up, and thank you for mentioning about the tires. I was wondering about when I saw some of the bikes you all took, if you might have reconsidered, more gravel-like tires. But so just some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, none of us had mountain bikes, and mountain bikes would certainly also be valid, a good option. As long as you can strap some bags to it. But it, you didn't really need a mountain bike, but it would have worked. But like I said, I would suggest at least 32s. And that first part, like I said, it was a little dicey, a lot of mud, and a lot of times where you'd be going along and you'd hit some muddy patch, and your tires would kind of swerve and weave a little bit, and you just kind of had to push through it. But yeah, I would definitely say 32s at least for that first part.
No, he says 32.
Rick, thanks a lot. That was good. Ralph and Happy here.
Oh, you're welcome, Ralph.
Right. Hey, Elaine Quick asked if David could let her in the meeting. She's offline, so I'm not sure about that. And also, Elaine and I did the gap. So you've inspired us. We're going to try to pull our pictures together and give you all some insight on the gap.
That would be great.
Yeah, I don't see her sitting in the waiting room because you shouldn't need to wait, but I wonder if she's on a different meeting invite.
Well, I can see Elaine's picture. I see Elaine's on.
Yeah, I see her too. And she's talking.
Yeah, you're muted, Elaine. I think you're muted.
Okay, you want to leave?
She doesn't realize she's muted.
You want to leave?
Yeah, just Elaine, if you're trying to talk, there's a button down the bottom of your screen. If you just move the cursor down to it, you can unmute yourself.
Sure. Do you want to go? What's?
No,
There we go.
The fact that I can't see you is okay, I guess. If you can see me, that's fine.
yep.
Okay. That was an excellent presentation, Rick. And Diane and I would like to, we've both been a little busy, but it would be fun for us to get together and to present our gap trip. That would be fun.
Yeah. That'd be
Yes,
great.
please, Elaine and Diane.
We're gonna do it.
Thank you.
Homer here. I'd be very interested in that.
Okay. It was, we had a lot of fun. What can I say? There's a lot of joking around, but we tried to take it seriously.
Rick, I have one last question. Would you do it again in 3 days or would you stretch it out?
Question.
No, I don't know, what Homer and Ken and Rich think. I think 3 days was good. To do it in 4 days, we probably would have had a little more time on our hands, like you get into the ending point at 2 in the afternoon, and then like, what do you do the rest of the day? And
You're constrained, this is Homer here, you're constrained by where you might spend the night. It's not how far you want to go, but the trail does not, it's really not civilization. So every now and then you come to a town, and that's really the limiting factor.
Thank you.
We actually ran into a tour company that was running on the trail in large part with us, and they did the same stops: Hancock, Harpers Ferry, Washington, D.C. That's the way they break it up. So
the one thought I had, if you wanted to eliminate the worst part and eliminate the risk of the Pawpaw Tunnel being closed, you could maybe go to Hancock first and then drive to or bike to the Pawpaw Tunnel and do like an hour back from Hancock to the tunnel and back the first day. And then the second day, go to Harpers Ferry, and the third day to DC. That way you'd avoid that worst part, the muddy part, and you would also eliminate the risk that the Pawpaw Tunnel is going to be closed. Because we would have been in a little bit of trouble if the Pawpaw Tunnel was closed, to be honest. When I think about if I would have had to push that 50-pound bike up over a 3-mile Billy Goat Hill, I don't know. And there really wasn't many options to get. I remember I did a lot of research, looking at Ride with GPS and Google Maps to see if there was any way to get from Cumberland to the other side of the Pawpaw Tunnel on roads, to just bypass the C&O. And there really isn't. At least I couldn't find anything that was feasible. There were roads, but they didn't look like roads I wanted to bike on, So.
It seems to me like a nice ride would be just from DC up to Harpers Ferry, spend the night there, and then go back to DC.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
That'd be like, a good amount of mileage and avoiding a lot of the less pleasant aspects that you had to deal with.
Yeah.
And that's also the best surface of the
Yeah,
trail is on that section you just mentioned.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks for your attention. And if you have any other questions that crop up, if you're planning to make a trip like this, and you want to, go ahead. Feel free to reach out, send me an email, and try to answer any other questions you might have.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rich. We really enjoyed it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great presentation.
All right. See you all.
All right, well, I think that's it for the meeting, unless anybody else has any general questions or announcements.
No.
All right, thanks, Rich, again. Thanks, everybody. I'll talk next month. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks all.